Welcome, Dr. Marie Haynes, the wonderful Nick Ranger, and the beautiful Lauren Baker.
Thank you.
Hey.
Yes, it's a pleasure.
Thank you.
We're going to be talking about how to leverage EAT with your content strategy. I'm really keen on this because I've never heard you speak, Marie, so this is going to be a first for me, and I'm really, really excited. Lauren was the one who inspired it with his repurposing of content for the Search Engine Journal, and Nick is here because she's the best host I know, and she's going to help me host and bring her amazing insights. So firstly, Marie, a little introduction. I know you're in Canada, you were a vet, and you've been in SEO since 2010, and you're obsessed with understanding what Google sees is quality. Is that right?
Pretty close. 2008, but we're close. We're close.
I
Right,
didn't have my glasses on when I was reading. So.
You have a lot of bios to remember. You're forgiven.
Yeah, I love the penguins behind. Is there a reason for
Thank
that?
you. No, just we like penguins.
Didn't you start with penguin?
Penguin was the thing that really got me into consulting, into doing SEO as a full-time. Here's something that maybe I can get interested in and maybe help some people with. And obviously my career went further than that. But yeah, penguins always have my children have a hard time understanding why I adore penguins and also don't like penguins at the same time, because I saw firsthand the devastation that the penguin algorithm did to so many businesses. But we still keep them around on the walls and stuff.
Okay, brilliant. I was actually looking you up, Marie, in the knowledge panels, doing some research, and I found that you're in some way, your name at least is in some way related to Susan Brazier, who has a knowledge panel, and apparently she's aged 171 years. She was born in 1848 and hadn't died yet.
Wait, I'm related to her?
No, in some way. The knowledge graph sees you guys as in some incredibly vague way related.
That's also related to, you used to be a vet, right? And that's how you got into SEO.
Correct, but not 187 years or whatever that was. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Next, Lauren, brilliant. Lovely to see you here. You're from Search Engine Journal, or you founded the Search Engine Journal. You're the content repurposing king, and you've been around since 1998.
Yeah, I have no previous experience before marketing, no doctorates or veterinarian background, but now I know a little bit more about you, Marie. So I have a pet blog I may need a contributor for. But yeah, it's really a pleasure to be here.
Brilliant. And then for this particular episode, we started off with what is EAT? Why is it important? This is about how can you leverage EAT through your content, and that's why you're here, because of your repurposing skills, and I'm really keen to hear what you've got to say. And last we've got Nick Ranger, and I found something lovely about you. You owned a company called Meat and Veg.
Oh my gosh, yeah, back in 2012. This is after I decided not to be an engineer anymore, and that I would thrust myself into the world of making healthy vegan snacks. I don't know. And now through many different avenues, now I'm here.
Brilliant. Okay, and we're actually now welcoming more people who have just joined the webinar, and I was going to talk to Nick a bit longer, but I think everyone's getting impatient. So we're going to move on with Marie's presentation. Please do ask your questions in the chat as we go through. What we will then do is be able to address them at the end. I'm keen to address everyone's questions. We're doing content and EAT now. After this, it's Jonah Alderson with EAT and structured data. And after that, it's measuring, structuring your EAT work and visualizing your EAT with Andrea Volpino and Dave Davis. So, Marie, if I may pass over to you for your rather wonderful presentation that we had a quick look at earlier on.
All right, let's do it. So there's so much that we could say about EAT. And I mean, the fact that we're doing a 4-hour afternoon on EAT tells you that there's a lot to discuss. And I think Jen did a great job. I was tuning in the background there, listening to what EAT is. I think most of us who are listening to this webinar, watching this webinar right now, have a general sense of expertise, authoritativeness, trustworthiness. Those are all things that Google wants to value. And what we want to to know as website owners, as SEOs, as people that consult with business owners is how can we actually be in line with what Google considers high quality content? And a lot of understanding that is understanding EAT. I'll go over here. This is my EAT slide. And just like Jen said, it's very hard to brag about yourself. But you need to do that in a lot of cases. If you're writing content that you want people to actually pay attention to, if you want people to say, look, this person knows what they're talking about on this subject, you need to be bragging about what it is that you have, what experience you have in certain areas. And so, you know, you can read the stuff about my expertise. The thing I'm most proud of is my team and I work on a newsletter that we produce every week. And we have a few more members in the team now, but if you're not a member of our newsletter, I'm going to throw out a quick pitch there to join us, because we talk about what do we think Google is doing. Is Google have they pushed out an update that maybe values a certain aspect of EAT, and we look at what particular websites are thriving with each update and which websites seem to get hit, and it really helps us stay on the cusp of what Google's doing. I wanted to start off though by talking about author EAT, and for those of you who haven't heard me speak before, I like to throw in cat gifs with my talks, and I can give a really excellent talk, and by far the #1 comment that I'll have afterwards is how amazing the cat gifs are. So I'm sure that's why you're giving up your afternoon to see cat gifs. But still, let's talk about author EAT. Here's the question that everybody asks me all the time is, do I need to have an expert author on my content? And honestly, it depends. I mean, if you have a medical site and you can go out and get somebody who is a medical doctor who has expertise in your area to actually write your content, then yes, definitely that's a good thing to do. But not everybody needs to have the foremost leading expert in every single field writing your content. Some of you do, though. So how do you determine whether you actually need to have expert authors in order to rank well? And I think the answers are in the Quality Raters guidelines. So this screenshot here, the guidelines actually give us several examples. And if you haven't read the Quality Raters guidelines, that's your homework for tonight. It absolutely must be done. You can click on, you know, links in the guidelines, and they'll open up PDFs with screenshots of the example sites that they've given. And in this particular case, WikiHow, now WikiHow has done a better job recently at improving their author EAT, but this is actually given as an example of not good display of EAT. And the guidelines actually tell us there's no evidence that the author of this post has financial expertise. And this is a post about how to pick stocks. So if you were interested in getting into the stock market, it's really important that whatever you're reading, you're going to trust. And so let's look at what they used to do. If you see here, they've listed the authors, and this might be a little bit hard to see, the slide's a little bit small, but they've listed Robert Friedland and Kent Smith and some guy named Zach and Brett. They're that well known that they're the Madonna of stock investing, that they don't need a last name in order to be known. Probably most of you don't know who these people are. I didn't know, and I had to look them up. And so again, Google gave this as an example of not good display of financial expertise. So how does Google do that? How do they determine whether this person is well known and whether this is somebody that we could trust to write about stocks? So we don't know exactly, but the Quality Raters guidelines talk about our other experts speaking about this person as an expert on this topic. So one way that we look at that when we're doing a site quality review and we're trying to figure out whether a website could actually improve their EAT, whether they have authoritative authors, we look in Google News. Now, I'm not saying this is exactly what Google does, but what we're looking for here is we're trying to see, are there people who are referencing this author? Are there people who say, oh yeah, when you're talking about stocks, you need to see this guy, Robert Friedland. An example would be, and this is a little bit of an egotistical example and kind of a meta example. If you were talking about EAT, you might recognize my name in connection with EAT, and also the other people who are speaking at this event, because we're known as the experts on this topic. And so you want to have writers where people say, oh yes, She or he is the one who writes on this topic. They know their stuff. Now, if you look at Robert Friedland here on Google News, there's 5 sites that mention him. They're kind of old mentions. There's not an overwhelming amount of evidence to say like, oh yeah, this guy knows his stuff. The other thing too, I should go back and show this article has no author bio. So if I'm a reader trying to figure out whether this is a good content for me to read, there's nothing. I can't click on Robert Friedland's name. I can't, there's no author bio to tell me why this person is qualified to write this. So let's look at, I actually did this search just as I was preparing these slides, and how to pick a quality stock investment, because that was the topic that Google gave as an example of a low quality post. And I'm actually gonna start by looking at this second example first of all. So the featured snippet is owned by Wealthsimple, which I think most people would recognize that as a brand that has some authority in terms of financial things. And the second one is Investopedia, which again, we're familiar with that name. Most of us are aware of this. Let's look at the Investopedia site. This is the article that's currently ranking for how to pick stocks. And if you look at this author's name, you can actually click on his name and you'll see all of this EAT information. You don't need to read all of it, but you can see very quickly that this is a person who has real life expertise in terms of finances. And so if this individual writes something on picking stocks, I'm more likely to trust his information because he's actually done this in real life. Now, the interesting thing though is if we look at the featured snippet, and it's this article here, written by Vanita Lusk. Now, if you click on this bio, they display, and I heard you talking in the last webinar about how do we display author bios, and we can go into more detail if people have questions on that after. But the reality is, you need to do something that your readers can quickly see. The goal should not be how can I convince Google that my authors are authoritative. The goal should be how can I show my readers that my authors know what they're talking about, that they can trust this content. If you click on that link that says bio, you can see this is her EAT related stuff. The goal here, I believe what they were trying to do is to say, look, you're reading this article, here's why we feel that this woman is qualified to write on this topic. But what's interesting is if you look, you can see that at the very end of her bio, she holds a degree in journalism. She's actually not, she's not Warren Buffett. She's not, she doesn't know, she's not known. I didn't know this person's name. Now, maybe some of you who are into stocks and financial investments know her, but she's not an expert. So how would Google determine that this content should be the content that's ranking well? Let's look at the quality raters guidelines to show us that. They talk about how the raters are supposed to find reputation research to find out what real users as well as experts think about a website. Now, if you look at the heading of this section of the quality raters guidelines, it actually says you're doing research on the website or the creator of the main content. And there are many places that talk about the importance of other websites thinking that you are qualified to write on this topic. So don't get hung up on, I absolutely, I haven't gone to financial school, so I can't write a financial thing. This is what Vanita has done, is you can see that she's been featured in MSN Money, she's been featured in Yahoo Finance, in Well Kept Wallet. And so if these places that are seen as authorities in terms of finances trust this person to write their content, and she's featured in many, many different places that talk about investing and stock market skills, then that's something where Google's algorithms likely can gather that her content is trustworthy. Now, we also have to keep in mind too, though, that the site that she's writing on has its own brand authority. And in some cases, I've seen people say, oh, but this site is outranking me and they don't even have an author on their posts. Sometimes the authority of your brand can carry you beyond actually needing authors. I believe the quality raters guidelines talk about IBM. And if you see something on IBM's website, it often doesn't have an author associated with it because we all know IBM. I didn't have to say IBM, the company that makes computers. Like, we all know who that company is, right? And so whether or not you actually have an expert expert can depend on whether your brand is seen as an expert as well. And some of your efforts in improving EAT should be going strongly towards making yourself known as an expert, getting yourself published in other places. I'm sure Vanita didn't just go up to Yahoo Finance and say, hey, I've got an article. You know, she sent out emails like we get every day of, I've written this great article on 20 things that are worth stockpiling. Pardon me. Oh, forgive me for that. Very dry in here. Okay, well, let's move on here. Oh gosh, and this is going to go on for a little bit. Jason, do you want to chat just for a second? I'll just got to fix myself here.
Yeah, I mean, we've actually got some questions coming in, and I also noticed we've got matching glasses for the water, which is brilliant.
Hooray.
We've got lots of questions coming in, and I was just looking at, I just did what you told me to do, Marie, and I looked up my own name in Google News, and the only reason I'm in Google News at all is because of Search Engine Journal.
There you go. And that speaks to your EAT, right?
Yeah, I mean, so thank you, Lauren. Obviously, I hadn't ever thought of that before. Lauren, how is it that you've managed to do that? Why am I so present through you?
Well, we're indexed in Google News, which helps, right? And given the age of the site, we've been in Google News for a long time, and we're a preferred publisher with Google News, which helps as well, because not every site that's indexed in Google News you'll see show up when you do those queries, but most preferred publishers you'll see at the top.
Okay. In fact,
there's also another good thing to look for.
Yeah, okay. No, brilliant. I mean, I didn't know, and I'm really glad I write with you guys now, or for you guys now. I also got in through a Microsoft site because I did a series of interviews with the guys at Bing. And so that was kind of the double way in it. And if I'd looked at that 6 months ago, I wouldn't have been there at all. So Marie, you would have told me to buck my ideas up and get myself some better eat.
Well, and there you go. And it's not, I want to emphasize, it's not that you need to be in Google News. It's not like Google has an algorithm that says, you're in Google News, therefore you're authoritative, right? But Jason, you would not have been on Search Engine Journal if you didn't have some level of recognized, people recognize that, you know stuff about SEO, right? And so,
no, it all plays off each other, and it's a big picture you need to build. Yeah.
Yeah. So this was interesting. Glenn Gabe tweeted this, and it was a patent that was analyzed by Bill Swalski, a Google patent, that talks about the fact that Google actually could know who authors each article. Now, this is controversial because Danny Sullivan's been asked about this, and he says, no, we don't know that a particular expert has written anything. And yet this patent that Google has says, we could verify that a certain amount of text is written by this particular author. Why is this important? Because we see people all the time that feel that they can fool Google's systems by saying, we've got this author. We had one client who just pretended, not on our advice, pretended that this very authoritative author had written a bunch of their content and slapped this doctor's name on all of their content. And it was very clearly not expert written. So whether Google is actually saying, this content was written by Jason Barnard, so it must be good stuff, or whether I believe that what they're saying is they're looking at things and going, yes, this is written in the type of tone and phrasing and using the types of words that an expert in this field would write. And that means that it's very tricky to fake EAT. And there's more on this. This is kind of a long quote from John Mueller. But the really important part here is that what you're trying to do is, again, convince users as opposed to search engines that your content is written by somebody who is qualified to do so. And so does it matter? Really, this is the question that you should be asking. The other thing that you can do as well is look at who's currently ranking for your content, for the keywords that you want to rank for. And ask your readers, put your mind in the mindset of a reader to say, if somebody was reading this content, would they recognize this author? Would they think that this author has written something that's really good? And if not, and if you have a lot of content that really isn't the best of its kind, then that can be seen as a sign of lower quality. I want to talk about this blog post that Google put out in the summer last year about core updates. And the post got a lot of attention, but probably for the wrong reasons. It got a lot of attention because Google linked out to some SEOs who had written about EAT. And I think everybody focused on this, oh, it's not fair, or it is fair, or whatnot, as opposed to the content of what is actually in this document. It's really, really good. And this document talks about what you need to focus on if you were negatively affected by a core update. And they actually say in many places, produce really good content, because that's what their algorithms seek to reward. And again, we see all these people that are trying to create content and then prop it up with links. And if it's not the best of its kind, it's going to be very tricky to do that these days. So, how does Google determine whether your content is good? You remember back, and I think even today, if you ask a Google employee, how do I rank better? The answer is usually create great content, right? And so you kind of wish that Google gave us like, a textbook or some type of guidelines to say how to create great content, and they actually do. This is again from this blog post that they say if you're trying to understand how the quality raters understand good content, then that can help you to improve your own content. So let's talk about that. And again, in the same document, they say it again, like think like a quality rater. I know Jen covered this in her talk. Is EAT a ranking factor? And I was jokingly going to say the cat at the top of the ladder is a bunch of SEOs who say no, and the one climbing up the ladder is me. Is EAT a ranking factor? It's not a single ranking factor, but it's darn important. And if you're one of these people that has been saying, look, EAT is just fluff, I don't need to pay attention to it, I think by now, most of us should know that, even though it's not like a simple score that we have like, ooh, your EAT is above this level, so now you can rank. It's a collection of signals that is extremely, extremely important. And as Jen mentioned, this was just added to Google's document on how to deal with core updates. And they say in assessing your own content in terms of EAT criteria is the way to do it. And so again, the quality raters guidelines, you can find these. There's a link there. It's a very long PDF file, but every one of us should read this. And I often say, if you don't have time to read it, just Control F for your industry. For example, if you're a recipe site, there are examples in there that talk about recipe sites and what's good and what's potentially bad. If you don't have time to read the whole thing, we do have a document that it is for sale though, where it's a checklist that we go through on things that we look at in terms of, is this something that Google has said in the guidelines could be high or low quality? And we try to find that in our websites. But all of you can do this. I mean, the guidelines, it's not like they're written in some crazy technical talk that's hard to understand. It's very black and white that Google will say, this is good quality, this is necessarily not good quality. One of the things they talk about a lot, and this is probably not something that you expected to hear in an EAT talk, but I really think that this leads to trustworthiness. We focus so much on expertise that we forget. Authoritativeness is really tied into links and page rank, but trustworthiness is, in my opinion, is the most important component of EAT, and we don't hear a lot of people talking about it. So let's talk about page titles, and this is in the guidelines. They say that a characteristic of a high quality page is to have a satisfying amount of high quality main content, including a descriptive or helpful title, which is something kind of, you wouldn't think that this is all that important. It's important though that this is one of those places where the wording is written towards a quality rater as opposed to somebody who has technical or SEO expertise. They're not actually talking about the titles on a page, but the headings. This is the screenshot that is given in that example. And you can see that the heading here that they have outlined in red, I didn't outline this, this is what was given in the guidelines, says that this particular page is about the sand digger scoop and swivel backhoe sand toy. That's a mouthful. But it's very clear to a reader when they see this, they call it a title, but really it's a heading on the page, what this page is about, what the purpose of this page is. So why am I bringing this up? And I think this is probably one of the most important things I learned while prepping for this talk. The guidelines talk about how every page has a purpose. And we should all be paying very close attention to what the beneficial purpose of our page is. So some pages on the website are what we call informational. They're just there to provide us with information. There's social pages, they say, there's media and other options. But look at the third to last bullet point. It says one of the possible types of pages is to sell products or services. And most of us who are trying to optimize websites, we're trying to help people to sell a product or sell a service. And so that's a different class as pages that are informational. So why does this matter? There was a very interesting Twitter thread in the fall by AJ Khan, who was talking about the Bay Area search event, and Gary Ish from Google spoke at this event. Now, I hesitated on whether to share this because this is something that we don't have written down. We don't have an official statement from a Googler. This is something that was sort of implied, but I think it's legitimately true, that in many cases, when you look at the search results, there are probably only a certain number of spaces that are reserved for transactional queries. So let that kind of sink in. If you're trying to rank a product page and everybody else on that SERP is informational, you're going to have a hard time ranking that. And it's because of trust. If people are looking for information, they don't want to be sold to. They don't want to be saying, buy this, here, click this link, and here's a discount code, and blah, blah, blah. You want to get information. So I did a search the other day for vitamin D. You may find in some of these slides that there are some searches from Google Germany, and that's because I was prepping this section for SMX Munich, which for obvious reasons didn't happen. But if you do a search for vitamin D, everything we see on this SERP is informational. We could see that there's a government site, there's medical news today, there are no calls to action on that page. If we scroll down even further on the SERP, it's all informational sites. I clicked on every one of these and none of them were trying to sell me anything. Now, what if I do a search for buy vitamin D? In this case, I'm very clearly looking to make a transaction. I'm trying to figure out, I've got my credit card out, I want to buy stuff. And now I see shopping results, I see ads, and I see, you may not be able to see all of this very well, but I could see that the pages that are being displayed to me are pages that actually sell something. And so what if we do a query that's kind of in between? So what if I do a search for, should I be taking vitamin D? That's sort of like a middle of the funnel search, because I'm looking for information, but I'm also thinking about buying it. And in this case, this is a medical query that Google may not be sure whether I have buyer intent. All of these results are informational. And so I see some of you that are trying to figure out how to rank your product pages against high authority medical sites that Google is not going to derank in order to put your product page in there. So one little tip that I can give you is that sometimes you can actually rank well by making a product page into an informational guide. If you do a search for essential oils, doTERRA is a company that's well known for making essential oils. They ranked, last time I checked, on the first page for essential oils, which is not buy essential oils, but just essential oils. And this particular page has no calls to action on it, other than, I think there's none. Take a look at this particular page. Most of us have probably heard of this company in terms of vitamins. If you do a search for vitamins, this page is one of the only I think all the other sites that are ranking are government sites, very well-known medical sites. So how did this company that very clearly sells vitamins get on this first page? So take a look at this GIF and tell me when you see a call to action. Was a very uncomfortable pause, right? It's there. You have to go through the entire page before there's something that actually says, hey, you could buy this on our website. Now, I have not experimented in great detail with this. It's kind of, it is some, I've heard studies, Stacey McNaught did a really good talk at one of the Search Love conferences recently, where she talked about taking a product page and making it into an informational guide. And they were actually able to regain rankings on the first page. So that's important too. Let's go on. I think I'm a little bit longer here, but I've got some good stuff here, so I'll try to get through it quickly. Talking about the title of your page. This is all throughout the Quality Raters Guidelines that you should not have an exaggerated or shocking title tag. It even says, again, in the guidelines that this is a sign of low quality content if you have a shocking title on your page or a title tag that doesn't really reflect what's happening in real life. This is a screenshot from one of the examples given in the Quality Raters Guidelines, and Miley Cyrus did not die at the age of 22. As far as I know, she's still alive. But this was the heading that was shown in the guidelines as a clickbaity, not trustworthy title. And here's another example about this doomsday conspiracy. And what the guidelines actually say about that article is that the title makes it appear like there's an impending catastrophe. Well, they obviously didn't write this in 2020. Because who knows what could happen, right? But probably, I mean, even the content itself says that this Nibiru doesn't actually exist, and this is fake news. So this is something that we need to be paying attention to. And I think most of you who are listening and watching this right now, you're not writing this level of clickbaity titles, but some of you, especially with medical sites, are writing stuff like this. These essential oils will cure your cancer. Now, this could be a whole talk on its own, but we believe that Google can very quickly check that against their knowledge base of information that they have. If you do, and you can check this manually by doing a Google search. If I do a Google search for "do essential oils cure cancer," I was searching from Canada when I did this, and I can see cancer.ca, which is known as an authoritative site, says there's no evidence that essential oils or aromatherapy can treat cancer itself. So if you're making claims that directly contradict what experts in your field tend to say, then we think that this could be seen as a sign of low trust. Now, it's possible that some of these headings might be better. And how persuasive you are in the headings really depends on what type of authority your brand has. If you were the Mayo Clinic and you wrote an article that was called "Can Essential Oils Be Used to Treat Cancer?" probably Google would be okay with that heading and would not treat that as something that should be treated with distrust. But if you were "best essential oils to buy in Canada.com or something like that, and you have this heading, "Can essential oils be used to treat cancer?" you probably don't have the level of authority to make that claim. And so the goal here is to, again, not be saying things that would make the experts in your field cringe or make this face. Well, I have more in this talk about, this is what the Google's document again on core updates. They have several mentions of the headings on the page. So one of the things that we have done, there's a guide that we wrote on how to actually go through your content, especially if you're a medical site, and determine whether your content could be seen as contradicting scientific consensus. And this is a client of ours that took our guide and made changes to their, a lot of their headings, trimmed out some of their content that could potentially be seen as lacking trust. And they saw very nice, they were hit with the June 3rd core update. And that, if you were negatively affected by that, the vast majority of sites that were affected by that update were ones that we felt had trust issues. There were a lot of alternative medical sites that were directly contradicting what traditional physicians would say. So you can find more information about that on this post that we've written. This last bit I'll just go through very, very quickly. When I originally prepped for this talk, I thought it was an hour-long talk. So I'll instead of cutting stuff out, I'm going to zoom through because I think there's a lot of stuff that will help people. I just want you to know that copied content is not just straight exact duplication, that Google is very good at determining. So many of their questions that they ask in this post on core updates are talking about, does the content provide substantial, complete, comprehensive discussion on the topic? Is there interesting information that's beyond obvious? Does it draw on other sources or does it copy those sources? So we see this all the time, that people are trying to rank content that is just really boring, basic stuff that everybody already knows. And even John Mueller, you know, this tweet got a lot of flack. We use it in our site reviews, though, to say, look, Google wants to rank content that's the best of its kind. So stop trying to, use I'm not saying content writers are all bad, but if you're doing really cheap content writing by people who don't have expertise and you're trying to prop that up with links, you're probably going to find that it's not going to work as well. We believe that this is because Google is using BERT to actually understand the quality of your content. Whereas in the past, you could take the kind of like okay content and point links at it, and it would outrank some of the amazing content. And that's not the case now. So if you saw negative effects from the November 8th update, which was not a core update, Google did not give an announcement about this update, but a large number of sites saw drops at this time. We called this a link-related update. And the reason for that was that the majority of the sites that we monitor that saw drops at this time were sites that were using link building tactics that were just kind of on the gray scale. Recipe sites that were using link wheels saying like, oh, you like my recipe? Here's 10 other recipes from my friends, and they would all interlink. But I think that we actually made a mistake in calling this a link update, because I believe that instead of Google devaluing these sites because of the quality of their link, they just made links less valuable because they could figure out that the content itself was good. So those sites that were previously propped up by the power of link wheels, now that Google's better able to assess the content itself, they are outranking some sites that had used link building tactics. I know that was a lot to put into this short period of time, but this is very, very important. What we're still trying to figure out, I don't know whether disavowing those types of links will actually help. Our gut instinct is at this point, no, unfortunately. But the point of saying this is just to put emphasis on creating absolutely the best content that people, here's a good indicator of whether your content is good. If you take your content and show it to somebody alongside whoever's currently ranking #1 for that query, if users will consistently say, you know what, I would rather read your content than the stuff that's at #1, and not just your friends, but like unbiased users, then you've got something going. If your content is essentially the same as what's already ranking from the authoritative sites, then you might have issues in terms of quality. And that can really be impacted with Google updates. So this is our braggy slide, just to talk about how we have a great number of clients that we've taken a number of things in the quality raters guidelines and said, look, Google has said this is a sign of quality and you can improve in this way. And sometimes if you work hard and you do good work and actually truly don't try to cut corners, but create great stuff, you can see really good results from it. And with that, I think I'll pass it back to you, Jason.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
That was amazing. I learned lots of things when I saw Nick was laughing at the cat gifs.
They're awesome.
Brilliant stuff. We're gonna move this over a little bit to Lauren, because obviously Search Engine Journal is an incredibly authoritative source with an awful lot of great authors. How have you implemented EAT-driven strategies, and what are the results?
Yes. So first, let me back up a little bit. I had misspoken. We're not a preferred partner with Google News. What happened is in 2018, we were one of the first sites to start with their speakable schema testing. And in order to for them to index a speakable schema, we had to be updated to be a trusted source. So we're a trusted source within Google News. And typically you do see more visibility from trusted sources, and they're usually the ones that you see highlighted on the Google News homepage. I saw those questions come in. How have we implemented EAT? So about 5 or 6 years ago, we did a really big cleanup on SEJ, making sure that our authors were current, real, not in trouble doing anything else they shouldn't be doing, and weren't dropping links on our site. A big part of that cleanup was really moving to prove that not only was the topic matter that's being shared accurate, or at least accurate with the data that that author has to give, because as we know, it depends, right, when you're making conclusions a lot of the time. But also we made sure that they were real people from real companies, and we wanted to really show that. So one of the first things that we did was we really beefed up author profiles. And there's a couple ways that we did that. One, we made sure that we had all of the publicly accessible information that those authors have as part of the profiles, right? Social channels, et cetera, all being linked from author pages, all being accessible from the post level as well. Secondly, we really encouraged our authors to write unique bios for SEJ. So when someone signs up or when someone's approved as an author, they have the ability to go in, edit their bio, and then also answer questions. What are you good at? What are you interested in? Almost in the same way that you would with LinkedIn. And then we boosted that up one level with adding schema attributes to the author profile, such as job title, company, et cetera, And then the next wave is really looking at things like alumni of schema, which I've been implementing on some client sites and things like that to show where the person studied. And then also same as schema, in addition to what's being utilized with the social channels, kind of like in Marie's example was at Veneta, where the one financial site had listed that she had published on Yahoo Finance, MSN Money, other trusted financial sites, and implementing that into our author bio data and on the schema backend. And I'd say the icing on the cake with all of that is making sure that if we do mention, this is a next step, but if we do mention the school they went to or the degree they have or whatever, is linking to those schools or those other bio pages on site as well as in schema, because I always want to have what's communicated with the on-site experience line up with what's given to Google from a schema perspective.
Okay, yeah, and we're going to be talking about schema with John Alderson in a bit, about kind of how we can use that. Obviously, for you, it's been quite effective. Do you consider it's been an effective tactic?
Yeah.
Strategy,
yeah.
sorry.
It definitely has. It's been an effective tactic. And this is going back to some Marie, your examples, is that it's not only an effective tactic at the end of the day for Google, we believe, but it's an effective tactic for our readers. So our readers know who they're getting the information from. And we're not a purely user-generated content site, right? We have a lot of staff that works for us, but we also have experts in the industry that contribute. We like to have those filters to make sure that they are trusted experts and then make sure that our readers also know that they're experts. And another way that we have extended this, and this is how you and I really met for the first time, Jason, which was kind of the flip side for me, is we've been implementing things like, video interviews, podcasts, things like that, and really lining up that audio, video, visual content with the written content that's contributed at the end of the day. So people just don't see an author profile, right? But they can look at the author page and find other forms of media that we've done with that author. And that really spreads out the EAT, in my opinion, through other Google channels, right? So it's not just in the written index, but also synced up with what we're doing on YouTube and synced up with that person's YouTube profile, synced up with what we're doing in audio and linking to all of the distribution channels for the podcast. And I think at the end of the day, weaving that web of relevancy back to that user and back to maybe the written content that they're contributing or the content that we're sharing, or even a quote where we're including a link to their Twitter handle or another one of their social handles when they contribute to a piece that's done by another author, I think really helps all of that at the end of the day show that, hey, not only is that person an expert, but they're contributing in all these different areas. They're not just writing, but they're giving quotes and they're giving their opinion, and they're also a multimedia part of a multimedia team and accessible everywhere else at the end of the day.
That's
yeah,
awesome.
I mean, what I hear there is sorry, you're putting up these big signposts, and maybe that's something we need to start doing, is putting up signposts. Sorry, Nick.
No, I was just going to say, like, for everyone listening, like, this is kind of like a spoken case study of utilizing EAT and building it out and marking it up to add to the knowledge graph. I think that's, like, when we're talking about EAT here, we're talking about like the page quality, and for Dr. Marie Haynes' presentation, like, it really is actually like assessing like okay, like what are you looking at in like in the SERP, like really assess like your page quality, like what is the purpose of that? And I think Lauren has done really, really well to be like, well, every single page that exists on Search Engine Journal, we really want to show that each one has like its unique purpose that serves the user. We want to adhere to expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. So he's gone through and made sure that every single author is of a quality expert to write that article, and then it's gone through and like it's such a massive piece of work, but that's kind of really what it takes to be a leader in your industry and a leader in the SERPs.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. And what he was doing, from what I understand, is pointing all this out. I mean, Jennifer was talking about bigging yourself up. I mean, he's bigging up the authors around Search Engine Journal, which by association then bigs up Search Engine Journal. If I understand correctly, Danny's just hit a new record traffic levels. Is that right, Lauren?
Yeah, we have. I think all the COVID news we've been publishing for the past few weeks probably led to that as well. But one thing that we've been seeing is we've hit well over 3 million page views a month. And we haven't been seeing the weekend dips that we used to see. But one thing I like to add too, and you know, Doctor, you brought this up a lot, is like, should you be bragging, right? And one thing that I've run into with SEOs, we love to brag. We like to talk about what we do all the time, even though we really can't, and things like that. But there's certain industries where people just don't, and a lot of it has to do with medical, right? Traditionally, in the medical field. You know, I've run into this with clients where we have their medical advisory board, or we have some of their chief executives set up to blog on the site. But when it comes to things like lining that up with their social profiles and everything else they do, they're not doing anything else, right? Even some of these have been book authors in the past. Maybe they wrote a book 10, 15 years ago, and their knowledge panel shows up because of that authoring history, but they haven't claimed the knowledge panel. So it's little things like doing, one thing that I've been doing on the client side from an internal content audit is kind of like an internal authorship audit, is going through and seeing who the leaders are at that company and who they're associating with and what their online presence looks like. Because a lot of the time there are lost opportunities when you go through and you do search for the names of all the people on their advisory board, all of the C-suites, people that have traditionally posted through the blog that may be at their company now, they may not be, who knows, and making sure that you can still line all of it up and encouraging those folks to, yeah, maybe update your Facebook, you know, once a month, or, you know, do we need Facebook? Well, it's nice to have it. Or, you know, maybe updating their LinkedIn, or going out and saying, hey, look, here's how you can claim your knowledge panel within Google, because it's showing up. And this is an opportunity not only for you to better the way that you're seen throughout the rest of the world when your readers are looking for you, or maybe someone's looking for you in a job search, whatever it may be, but also give more, not ranking value, but more expertise value, I guess, at the end of the day, to the content that you're contributing, or the content that's referencing you within your company. And you'd be really surprised the amount of folks where they didn't even know that they have a knowledge panel, or maybe they don't even know that there's a Wikipedia entry about them or something like that that helped to trigger that knowledge panel, and going out and identifying that and bringing it all in. So it's kind of like herding cats at the end of the day.
Yeah, and beyond that, in fact, it's search your own name or your brand name, Search Engine Journal, in my case, Jason Barnard, and check what your knowledge, if your knowledge panel is there, but also what all those results turn up. And I actually, once again, in the last episode of this, I did an experiment a little bit with Search Engine Journal. I do apologize. Didn't damage you. It was a perfectly nice and friendly test. Let's move on from authors and onto links, because Marie Anderson Ferreira is asking, do you think that at some point links will have a minimal importance in authority, and instead Google looks almost exclusively at the authority of the entity, i.e. that the links will only be part or a small part of the authority measurement?
It's a good question. You probably remember a few years ago, Yandex, the search engine that's predominant in Russia, did for quite a while. They took links out of their algorithm. And I remember Matt Cutts at the time saying that Google attempted it. They tried to take links out because they know it's the biggest problem right now that SEOs are spamming and succeeding at that point by building links. And when Google took links out of the algorithm, they could not produce good results. And I believe Yandex, I could be wrong on this, but I believe they went in and they changed things again and started valuing links. I have a theory, but I don't have proof for it, that if you are trying to rank for a YMYL query, so something that is important to people's lives, that the only links that Google wants to count are links that come from sites that they deem as having a certain level of EAT. So now that's not completely true, because anytime I say that, black hats will come out and say, no, I have this PBN that is working. And there are still ways to get around. There are loopholes, but they're getting harder and harder to do these days. So, you know, I think links will always be a component of Google's algorithm, but Google's getting way better at determining which links to count. So, for example, if you have been building links via guest posting, some guest post links could be good. Like, for example, if I guest post on Semrush, that's good for me. That's good for my EAT. It's my name in connection with an authoritative SEO related website. And that link will help me. But if I went out and got, you know, if I said, all right, everybody create a free WordPress blog now and link to me, and I'll pay you $100 each for that, like, that's probably not going to help, because Google's good at figuring out that where Semrush was recommending my content, these people who had just created a new website, why would Google want to pay attention to those recommendations? So links are still important, but I do believe Google's getting better at knowing which links to put value in.
Brilliant. Now, onto a completely different question. Now you've answered that one so beautifully. Because Nick's in Australia, she gets this because it's come up twice already. Hillary Quinn is asking, I know that it's not really on topic and it's breaking news, but how do you feel about the landmark ruling in Australia, which will compel Google to advise algorithm updates affecting content to media companies? That's all to do with...
So this... I remember seeing that come in. I think that's really been in the last week, but something similar also happened in France, where the ruling was that essentially, like, Google will have to pay publishers for their content that appears in the SERP. And I think for a lot of what we were kind of like, I guess, spitballing is like, well, what's the response from Google going to be if the government is sort of like decreeing that this is the way that they do it, and essentially, like, they'll probably do what they did in Italy, where they'll just like switch it off and just be like, well, we'll just be we won't have it. Again, like, I don't think I'm the best person to really like ask about this, because this deals with like law and things like that. But I think, like, for Australia, it's going to be really, really interesting seeing how that's going to affect all the like what actually appears like for news sites and things like that. Because I doubt that Google's going to loosen the purse strings, particularly at the moment.
Well, in France right now, I mean, I'm in France, so I see this all the time, and it freaks me out every time I'm looking at the results and it's news sites, and I just see the blue title with a link, and that was it, and there's no description. It still looks weird to me. And they're still fighting about it, and who knows where that's going to go. But Andrea Volpini from WordLift in Italy has been talking about the fact that you can now control, basically, if you use schema markup in your page, that explicitly says to Google they can use that content in the SERP. So it's actually a way for media sites to be able to control what Google use. So if you just say, I've got a title and a meta description, Google won't use the meta description in these circumstances. If you say, I've got a title and then a description in my schema markup, Google will say, I can use this. I've been given explicit permission. Sorry, that was a bit off topic. I would like to come back to Marie, because you actually mentioned something which is, and I'm really curious now, when I actually do all these quality improvements on my site, like Lauren did 5 years ago, how long does it take? So we'll start with you, Marie, and then you can tell us, Lauren, how long it actually took for you.
So if you're negatively affected by a core update, you tend to see the results instantly. Now, I believe on January 13th, Google announced that there was a core update, and it was January 14th that we saw most of the results. So it's not always on that exact same day, but within probably 24 hours of Google announcing an update, or they don't always announce them all, but a major Google update, if your traffic suddenly plummets, and I mean, I shared some of those screenshots of traffic that was going along great and then just dropped off a cliff. That's usually what happens when a core update determines that for whatever reason, Google does not want to treat your site as higher quality. The opposite can happen when you recover. So it depends on a number of circumstances, but generally what we tend to see is that a site will make changes and then Google will push another core update, and then we see that traffic either returns to where it was. Sometimes it doesn't return quite as much as it was. Sometimes it can return to even higher than it was. But and then Google pushes out core updates approximately every 3 months. We've had a little bit of a debate in SEO circles recently as to whether it's ethical for Google to push out a core update in the midst of us struggling with being home in lockdown or dealing with coronavirus. And you know, I have thoughts on either side of that debate. But if you're waiting, so let's say you've made a bunch of changes and you feel like you've made changes where Google's algorithms really should see your content as higher quality, for most situations, you need to wait until there was another core update in order to see a significant improvement. Now, that doesn't mean, you know, that you can't see any improvement, but often what we'll see, I sort of call it this, I call it an algorithmic ceiling, that when you get hit and then it's like you can never get above that particular line. And then when a core update goes again, then you have the normal, like, okay, I'm up higher now in terms of traffic.
Okay, brilliant. So that's hit and recover. And now, Lauren, when it's just saying, okay, I'm going to improve this, obviously you have two phases. You have the phase which is really difficult, which is getting people to actually update the content in the way that you want. And the second is that kind of push up towards the 3 million page views, sorry, you mentioned earlier on. What was the kind of time frame you're looking at for both those parts?
You know, I think we've seen incremental just increases on maybe a bi-quarterly basis. So it seems like every 6 months we start to see that lift, and it doesn't always seem to be around a specific update or whatnot. It kind of seems to be around like once people have picked up the parts from those updates, and Google tends to, they get enough complaints from people that know people internally, right? Oh, you shouldn't have done this, or you tried to do this, but it actually ended up doing this and this and that. And then what happens is they seem to tweak some things that were unintentionally broken, right? And then you start to see that increase. So we've seen definitely incrementally, but happening about every 6 months. I'd say 4 to 6 months throughout the course of the year. Definitely saw a huge increase with that January rebound as well, along with a lot of sites that have been hit during the medic and your money, your life stages last June as well. So, but you know, I would say one thing you can do is always get better, right? And always try to be ahead of the curve. The worst thing you can do really is implement something that Google's never going to use, but it makes your site better in the long term. Best thing you can do is implement things that your competition's not even thinking of, right? So when that does start to make a difference at the end of the day, you get that burst before they do, and it either means that you got more readers or you got more lifetime customers or whatever it is from doing so. So I would say keep an eye on the sites that are more nimble, that are not tied down with huge development teams, and see what they're up to, and also see what some of the sites that are doing extremely well in some of the more competitive spaces are doing, whether it's, you know, the financial spaces or medical spaces or whatever. The ones that are surviving, the ones that have bounced back, and apply that in your own vertical.
Great stuff. So, right, we're almost out of time. Absolutely brilliant. One last thing before we go. I mean, I like the idea that we improve the quality of our site. We push out our signposts to Google to point out that we've got these great authors and that we're a wonderful brand. Is it a virtuous circle, Nick?
Sorry, I thought that you were actually signing off.
No, I was saying, Marie, then in that case, are we looking at a virtuous circle? That EAT is just a virtuous circle that we get better. The better we get, the better Google sees us, the better we rank, and the better we look.
I think that's Google's goal. Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I definitely think so, and definitely Google's goal, because they want to be able to serve users like the best content, so that like they'll continue to use Google. They want to keep people using Google at the end of the day. But you know what we can learn from that as SEOs or as site owners. Like it's really important just to like make sure that like every single thing does count, and that you can really look at qualifying that information, qualifying the authors that are actually producing that information, utilizing structured data to link it all together, that give web crawlers like more information about that. And if it doesn't work, check out what's happening in the SERPs, because probably the search intent has changed or is different.
Brilliant. Oh, that's a lovely conclusion. Thank you very much, Marie. That was a great talk. Lauren, thank you for sharing your search engine journal experiences. And thank you, Nick, for that wonderful concluding comment. Nick's going to be back later on in a couple of sessions for the measurement, and she's going to be hosting. I'm going to be speaking. Lauren, I'll let you get back to your daily life, and Marie too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was fun.
Thank you.
That was awesome.
That was awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that groovy. I'll say groovy. You can say awesome. So thank you very much. Now we're going to move on to the next one, the third part, which is schema markup. We were talking about authorship. We were talking about how to structure your data, how to signpost Google towards all of this stuff to make sure that it actually does see your EAT. Obviously, we think we're great. We know we're great. We know we have all this EAT, but how can you actually explicitly point it out? And that's what Jono's here for with Andrew and Lily Ray.